Good evening, everybody, and welcome back to another Pastors Training Pastors presented to you by the Pastor Secretary. I'm Mishka, and I am super excited to have with us tonight Dr. William Pullam, and he's going to talk from the topic of Attention Young Pastor. So I'm going to bring him on now.
Good evening, everybody. I'm happy to be
Good
here. I
evening.
want to thank this very fine sister for inviting me to participate in this very important uh, setting and this very crucial and important topic. Uh, Talking primarily to young pastors, but it would apply to pretty much anybody, pastors that are currently that are new pastors, all pastors that want preachers that want to be pastors, and pastors to be we want young pastors called to preach and things. God has promised us in His Word over in Jeremiah, I believe it's 3:15. God said that He would give us, us being the church, pastors according to His own heart. And over in Ephesians, as Paul was teaching to the church at Ephesus, he made it crystal clear. He said that basically God speaks to us and says, "I will give some pastors, some evangelists, some prophets, and some there's more to ministry than just pastoring. As important as pastoring is, don't fall into the trap or the sight that people will tell you that if you're going to be a preacher, then you got to be a pastor. Not so. The ministry involved different, but a young pastor, I've had the blessed privilege of being in pastoral ministry for close to 40 years now. 2 years at the first church God blessed me to pastor in Goliad, Texas, and a rural church. The name of that church was Minnesota Baptist Church. And then I've been here at the St. John First Baptist Church for 37 years. Never thought it would be that long. But to have about a year of pastoral ministry. One of the key things, if you are a young pastor, you're entering into a new setting, a new environment, as senior pastors told me, take it slow. Don't be in a rush to go in, change everything, and come in with all of the ideas that you have built up. That's well and good, but take some time to kind of gather your footing and to learn the people that God has made you overseer of. In other words, the shepherd, which is our role as pastors, you have to know your sheep, and you need to take time to learn them and give them an opportunity to learn you. So that's one of the first keys is take it slow, take your time, exercise some patience, and teach and preach. That's primary. Teach and preach, not just preach, but teach and preach. So as for the issues that you'll face as a young pastor, many of you are probably already facing some of those issues if you're in a new setting, because many times pastors, churches extend calls to pastors under duress. Many times, I think some things have happened at a church which brought about the need of a new pastor, and sometimes it's not always good. And then in those situations, you got to understand you can't fix what somebody else, so to speak, messed up. It's not your job to do that. It's your job to teach, preach, lead, and direct as God directs you for that setting. So you can't buy into that, because your predecessor did this, this, and that, and there'll be some people in the average church that will want you to fix that and all that, but you can't get involved. You have to do what God directs you to do. And then for a young pastor that's longevity at a place. Now, understand, if a pastor, say, I use myself as an example, like when I step away from the pastoral ministry at a place, say, if I decided to leave in the next 2 months, 30 with these people, I'm the only pastor that some of these individuals have ever known, because some of them came to the church literally as babies, and now they have babies, they have families, etc. And so understand that they are accustomed to a certain style of leadership. Don't take it personally if they still have to be a task form, or time to time they'll let it slip, or they're not even knowing that, well, this pastor did it this way. So don't be offended. Let's take it for what it is. And I say focus on and concentrate on you being you, and you building the kind of leadership, again, I repeat, that God has directed you. And you focus on those areas. So don't get hung up on that, because ego sometimes can get on us and cause us to be somewhat intimidated in certain situations. Okay, now, as a young pastor, certainly when God sent you there, and we know churches called and extend calls, but understand, I believe what God says. God says, I will give you pastors. So if you're there, God has sent you there. And you just want to make sure that you know that you know that you know that God has sent you to that particular setting. It's not about size of church. It's not about any of that. Not about how what the salary is going to be. I'm not saying that's not important, but that's not the most important thing. The most important thing, young pastor, is that you know that God has sent you to that setting, because that is going to affect the way you lead. If you're tiptoeing around and you're not really sure and you're uncertain all that under, I'm trying to get you into that place, then your leadership will reflect that. So you have to uh, have the air of a leader that has confidence, just like you're confident in your call to the preaching ministry. Then you ought to be confident that God has sent you to pastor that particular flock. And if you're confident in that, that's going to show in your leadership. Because as a young pastor, as an old pastor, for that, nobody's going to agree with you all of the time. There's always going to be some naysayers. There are some people that stay there 5, 10, 15, 20 years. And if some people, if their mind is just made up that he's just not, I'm not going to embrace him as my pastor, well, understand, you embrace them as your member and move on. And don't be intimidated about what they say or what they feel or how they react to your leadership. In to move you off course from the direction that God has told you to lead. Whether people agree with you or don't agree with you, I'm saying that's not important, but that's not the most important thing. The most important thing is that you're following God's direction to you, because God is going to give you the vision to lead his people, to lead his sheep, to lead his church. And I'm emphasizing he is, because it's his. It's not yours. It's not mine. It's his. So he gives direction to you to lead. He's not going to give that direction. He's not going to give that vision to somebody else. And I know, young pastors, that there are what I call seasoned members or senior members that will come to you and understand their hearts might totally be in the right place. Well, at least some of them are not in the right place. But some of those individuals, their hearts in the church. And I want to share that with you and see if you may want to do something with that. Well, you have to devise a very nice way to gently let people down about that, because the vision that God has, he's going to give to the pastor that he gave to that church. That doesn't mean that other ideas don't come in. And it doesn't mean that you cannot seek help in moving the vision forward. That's part of teaching, preaching, leading, and training. But understand, but the vision, God gives the vision to the leader. And that can only be one leader. You are the pastor, young pastor. You are the leader. And you have to lead the sheep as God leads you. So I'm hoping that that makes sense. So many things that we could talk about when it comes to the church finance. That's another area that can be a touchy area, because uh, there there's some myth in church circles. There are myths there, and whatever money. And I know pastors from all walks of denominations, etc. But there's myths out there that basically all the pastor's supposed to do is preach and teach. That anything to do with finance, that we have the deacons or the trustees or the committee would handle all of that. And many of churches demand an off hands as far as the pastor is concerned when it comes to finance. But in reality, brothers and sisters, we have to understand. I mean, if it's hard to be in charge of something if you're not involved in that something. That doesn't mean you're trying to run it. Doesn't mean you're trying to be in charge of finance. But obviously, finance is part of it. I mean, yes, we are in a spiritual business, but in our spiritual business, it also involves other things. It involves finance. It involves administration. It involves structure. It involves decent and in order. So again, don't be intimidated when you're just arriving on the scene. You don't have to press the issue. There again, there's some things you take with a little grain of salt. There's some battles uh, that are worth fighting early on. But when it comes to the finance thing, just kind of hold off a little while, observe, and then when you get ready to, so to speak, make the move, you can make it intelligently and fairly, and people will understand through the things you've been teaching them importance of leader standing on another area in these 40 years of pastoring is when it comes to leadership in the church, other than the pastor. I mean, auxiliary leaders, etc., and the process of how you sort through that. Because many times when you come on the scene. There are individuals that are already serving, and hopefully and prayerfully, they are serving well. All right. So when you come in, that's part of the observation period because you should be assessing as a young pastor the effectiveness of your other leaders. Because understand, as auxiliaries go, so it's a no-brainer. If you have good spiritual leaders that are leading auxiliaries, they're going to help strengthen those auxiliaries. And when those auxiliaries are strengthened, obviously 1 + 1 = 2, obviously, then the church is going to benefit because then the church will be strong. So every church leader, in my opinion, again, this is my opinion. It's worked for me, brothers and sisters that are in pastoral ministry. It's worked for me. But that should be a criteria. In other words, the bar has to be higher than for. I'm trying to get a right way to say this. Than for the regular people. In other words, the leader of an auxiliary should have a higher bar to reach than those that they have leadership. Well, I mean, obviously, the bar for the pastor ought to be higher than it is for everybody else. The standard ought to be higher. That's just the way it ought to be. So don't be afraid to establish some kind of minimum requirements for your auxiliary leaders. I'm talking about presidents. I mean, folks that are leading auxiliary. I mean, because how if you are a pastor that's teaching a Bible study, coming to Sunday school, you're teaching stewardship of time, talent, and treasure, you're teaching tithing, etc., and you have leaders that are not in line with that teaching, then obviously they're not going to pass on to those auxiliaries that they're leading, the members of those auxiliaries, they're not going to pass that teaching on. So that's why it's necessary to have some type of structure, some type of criteria that's before the people. So when they step into office, they know that this is the bar that you are. There should be some criteria because in a period, it means that anything goes. So then, I'm just throwing different things out there. I'm trying to get to about the 20-minute point, and we'll have, if there are any questions or whatever, we can field questions, etc. But I'm just trying to throw different things out from my experience as a pastor. Uh, I guess fortunately or unfortunately for me, uh, when I entered into the gospel ministry, I did that. I would say what I consider late in life, because many years I literally, like a lot of you that in ministry probably did, I tried to get away from the preaching ministry. Now, I was a faithful servant to my church, all the church, but I had too many pastors, and I had no desire to pastor at all, none. I was not seeking the pastor. I was looking in the totally opposite direction. Now God had other plans, but during that time, when I went to college and got my degree in business administration, I've always been strong on administration, etc. And that has helped me in structuring uh, and forming criteria that has been instrumental in my attempt to be effective in pastoral leadership. I'm say I've been well, not perfect as you out of this year. Me and organize and also and sing to where people know what's expected, and they know that if they don't follow the criteria, that if the axe has to fall, have no cause to be upset or mad, because some people will say up front, well, that's not a bar I'm willing to reach. So those are some of the things I think will be helpful as young pastors. Of course, focus on preaching, and as a new pastor, you certainly it's critical that you focus on teaching. If that particular church that you go to does not have an organized Bible study or does not emphasize Sunday school and all that kind of stuff, I mean, it's just important, young pastor, because that's what will make the difference. Because when people are in the Word, people in the Word, see a lot of their self in always and have and be they may disagree with you. They may fully agree with you, but understand, if they are people of the Word, when you teach from the Word, they will respect and honor the Word. So that's why that is vitally important. Okay, we're 22 minutes now. There may be some questions. I could talk on and on and on, but I'm kind of going to stop talking now and see if there are any. Maybe someone maybe have some questions on something, and I'll do my best to try to answer the question. If I cannot answer the question, I will try to get you an answer, and then I'll let our sister know, and she can post it at a later date or whatever. Because I don't have all of the answers. Amen. Even after 40 years of being a pastor, I'm still learning every day how to be a pastor. Any questions?
Understand. Well, no, sir. There are no questions right now. Just the one that I put up was saying that he was helped, but there are no questions. If you all have questions, would you comment them so that he can answer them? And even if the live is over, you still can comment, and then I'll present the questions to him, and then come back and answer them like we've done in the past. Here's
Okay.
as he says. I love the advice. I've been interim pastor and wanting to end my term, but what are some things that I can do to prepare to become pastor?
Okay. All right. First of all, how long have you been, if I might ask?
Okay, so while we give him a chance to answer that, if anybody else has questions, please comment them again so that we can have them answered while he's here. I don't know if you have anything else that you want to share while we are waiting.
Oh, okay. And
I know you
I'll
have
share with
plenty.
the individual, and I'll share with the individual that why they're getting how long they've been there. And I ask that for a reason, because many times churches themselves would get hung up,
Oh,
and
well,
and,
he
and
did
they'll have
respond.
okay,
In
how long?
37 days, 37 days this Sunday.
Okay, 37 days. Okay, all right. Well, we in a good window then. I asked that question because many times our churches will avoid actually, calling a pastor, and they'll ride interim sometimes for years. I know
Oh, I
one
know.
individual that was interim like for 2 or 3 years, which is obviously far too long
Mhm.
for to be. But I'll say, young pastor, young interim pastor, all right, things that you can do to prepare uh, to be the actual pastor, whether it's at this place or another place, is teach and preach. teach and preach, because understand you're interim. So there are some responsibilities and some authorities that you don't have as a pastor, but you can still be preparing. You can still be teaching. You can still be preaching, and you can still be in the trenches studying. The role of pastor, so that when that opportunity does come, it may come sooner than you think, that you'll be ready to step right in pastor. You see some things that as interim. So some issues are going to be brought to you even as interim. Some questions are going to be asked of you even as interim. So it's giving you kind of like a pre-exposure of what the pastoral, how can I say, ministry in the that after.
Okay. So I shared with him because it was kind of going in and out on us that I'll
Yeah, I
get with
noticed
you.
that going in and out.
Yes, sir. So I'll
Yeah,
get
still
with
going
you.
in.
Oh, it's okay. We know that the weather is
Yeah,
bad in Texas. So I'll get the
yeah,
information from you and then I'll send it to him. So I send him my email address so that I can get from you the parts that we missed and then I'll send it to him.
that sounds good. That's great. That's great. All right. Anybody else? Okay.
No,
I hope
that's
somebody's
it.
been helped or encouraged. All right.
Yes, sir.
All right. But again, any questions, if you get to sister, we'll try to answer those questions. And I look forward to future sessions such as this, so I can tune in myself. Amen. And
Please
now that
do.
I've been reminded that I can go back and look at it, I've been trying to, listen to live because of another meeting we have on Monday. But I'm looking
Hmm.
forward to gathering information. I'm still learning. I'm ever learning. All right. Thank you
Okay.
all for listening.
Thank you. And I appreciate you saying yes. All right.
All right.
Okay. Well, good
Okay.
night.
So maybe next time the weather in Texas will be better. Good night, everybody. Love everybody. God
Good
bless. Y'all
night.
be safe.
Bye bye.